I was a professional anime translator, although I did novels, video games, that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
Japanese to English.
I see. And how long you been driving for Uber and Lyft?
I started about 6.5 years ago. I mostly was doing Lyft. I started doing Uber probably about 3 years ago.
Hmm.
hmm
How much do you average per hour in that?
Um, I drive Thursday through Monday, and normally on the weekends, you would normally make at least $40 an hour. Now it's significantly less. I'm usually averaging like 30 to 35 an hour.
Sure.
And, it used to be on the weekends, Uber was very profitable to drive. You would get massive surges. However, surges on Uber are now very rare.
Right. And what do you make? Is it sufficient to, support your operation as well as,
It's still, I mean, I have other resources besides this if I really need to, but I'm not making as much as, I'd say the height of what I was making was during the pandemic, but that was when the rideshare companies were so short of drivers. They were being extremely generous with incentive programs. That has all pretty much died away. I don't know if people remember, but pre-pandemic, things were getting kind of tough in the Boston area. What with we had too many drivers and there was just massive traffic, and we seem to have returned to those days.
right. Um, Now, what is that you really enjoy about this job?
I like to drive. I find it relaxing, and people think that that's kind of weird considering, the Boston driving in the Boston area can be pretty stressful for a lot of people. I enjoy it. I like chatting with customers, and there are drivers who hate to talk with people, and I'm the opposite. I like to talk with people.
Yeah, makes your operation go, I guess, faster, smoother,
hmm
more enjoyable. And what is it that you would change about this gig? What do you dislike?
What do I dislike? I dislike the one-sidedness of the power dynamic between the company and the driver. I wish that there was I wish that I didn't feel like a disposable commodity that they could just throw away at any time. That is that is the one thing that I would really love to change about this. I think I mentioned earlier, Lyft used to do like a really good driver outreach program where they would have parties. There was a sense that you know, you had some sort of an ally, if there was a problem. And now it's become very faceless. If there is a problem, you contact customer service, but customer service is a text message or somebody at a call center somewhere. And you never get the idea that there's really anybody advocating for the driver. And they would, you get the sense that they would cut you loose at any moment for any reason. And, there's not much that you could really do about it. So, really, what I would love is just enshrine some actual basic, employee rights for the drivers. And I mean, unfortunately, that would require changing labor laws for how this whole problem is just down to us being independent contractors, except we're not really independent contractors. We're only quasi independent contractors because we have no ability to set prices or anything. We only have
Right.
the ability to decide whether to accept a ride or not
Or go offline.
or go offline.
Right.
So, I wish that there was just something to it that that would give us some rights.
Looking back, what is your most memorable trip?
See, the problem is most memorable usually ends up being negative. I have had good conversations with all sorts of passengers where they might be academics, they might be foreigners who have come to Boston for the first time, and I would love to, point out things around the city as we're driving to their hotel. I love doing stuff like that. On the other hand, most memorable drives are usually like, I don't know, the lady who was screaming into her phone for 30 minutes and threatening to kill somebody for the entire time that she was, in the back seat, and that was uncomfortable. There was the lady that I picked up at a parking lot in Duxbury who was screaming at a bunch of guys, then got into my car, rolled down the window, and proceeded to scream at them some more as we drove away. And I realized with horror that I was her getaway ride. And then she decided to tell me her life story, even though I really did not want to hear it. And oh, by the way, we were going from Duxbury all the way up to Manchester, New Hampshire. That was 90 minutes of that. So yeah, that was my most memorable ride, I guess.
Then what would be your most paying trip within the 6.5 years?
I think okay, most profitable trip
Right.
was okay. So here's the thing: most profitable trip was picking up two ladies who needed to go to the Encore Casino, and they changed their mind and decided to change their destination to their homes, which were not far away. It was, I think, in like Jamaica Plain, so maybe 20 minutes. But one of them, to make it up for me, like just slipped me $100 bill for that
Nice.
half-hour ride. So that was definitely the most profitable ride that I ever did. I think highest paying is still one time that I drove somebody to JFK Airport in New York, and that one ride was about $300 for a 4.5 hour trip. And really, you could argue like that's not really that profitable because then you have to drive all the way back. But I picked up rides in Connecticut and stuff, so the day was actually pretty profitable. It was a long day, but yeah, I mean, that's the farthest that I'll ever drive somebody. It's just to New York. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way that I'm going to go any further than that.
Sure, sure. And I heard that these trips are offered to drivers nowadays at about $200, 180,
Yeah, because
220.
yeah, because that trip to New York was like a reserved ride on Lyft, and that was the year that JetBlue canceled like 1,000 flights, like right before New Year's.
Oh,
So it's like these people were desperate because all the trains and buses had been like already snatched by everybody else trying to get down. So I went into that trip knowing that it was to New York, and I knew they were leaving in the morning, so it was like it wasn't like these maniacs who want you to drive them to New York at like 10 o'clock at night.
right. It was more
Yeah,
of a professionals that trying to get there.
right.
Yeah,
And it's like the base pay that they were offering was like $250, and then the passengers tipped me like another $50. So I figured for like 4.5 hours, $300 was fair for me to get that.
sure.
So you don't see that anymore. I've seen people where they're like you said, they're offering trips to New York where they pay the driver like 175, and that in no universe is that a fair fare.
Mhm. Do you think there is a philosophy behind Uber and Lyft's algorithms as far as the pricing and do you think there is a other than AI? Do you think there is anything else behind it?
I'm okay. They have had years to perfect that thing. The whole problem is with upfront pricing and everything, it has turned into this sort of reverse auction. It's an auction where they offer the trip for as low as they can get away with, and then they see who's going to like reject it. Because once they introduce the whole ride radar thing, those are all just rejected trips that people are not taking, and then they throw them out to see if another driver will take them. And then if no driver doesn't take them, then they might up the price by a couple of dollars, and then they'll throw it out again. The algorithm is tuned to try to get a driver to take a trip for as little as possible.
Sure. What is the lowest rating rider you ever got?
The lowest rated rider, like
Yes.
star rating,
Yeah.
um, I have seen people down at like 4.5. Sometimes I've seen people down at like 3.9 or something.
Right.
The thing is, if I see somebody like that's rated below 4, I'm not going to take them because there is a reason that they're that low rated.
Sure. But do you think Uber and Lyft are playing the fair game, allowing those riders in the platform while penalizing drivers having 4.5 or 4.6?
I It makes you wonder what gets a rider kicked off the platform, because if you are down at like 3 point something, like what are you doing to earn those ratings, and why are you still allowed to ride? And
Right,
I'm guessing that they only kick you off if you actually do something that's actually dangerous or illegal.
right. Something completely off limits, right?
The problem is there's so many drivers out there that even if the drivers who hate these passengers are rating them as with 1 star and that they just get unmatched, there's plenty of other drivers to take their place. So, there's no real reason to get rid of a low rated passenger.
What future holds for Neil?
The future for me is I will probably keep on doing this for as long as it pays well enough to cover my expenses. I don't have particularly huge expenses in my life, so this is still working for me. And I joke that I'm a fundamentally lazy person, so this job sort of suits me in that I can do it as much as or as little as I want, and I still enjoy doing it. And I could always move on to something else if it completely falls apart. I think that there's always going to be a demand for these drivers, and yes, I know that there are self-driving cars and everything. You've got Waymo and whatever. I still don't see those taking over, like the passenger transport space for like a few more years at least.
Fundamentally, do you think that drivers in Massachusetts need a union or they don't?
I think we need a union, definitely. I wish more drivers understood the need to have some sort of collective bargaining. It's vitally important because we don't have any rights, at the moment. We really don't. And the only way to stand up to management is if the drivers actually try to do it. The problem, of course, is we're divided. We are not, technically employees. And there are plenty of drivers who do not want a union because they assume that it's going to lead to having to drive specific shifts and drive minimum numbers of hours. They want to still have the flexibility to come on and come off whenever they want.
Do you think it's because our neighbor New York has a similar situation? Do you think that's where the drivers get that idea?
The problem with gig economy work is it's still historically new, and we exist in a legal gray area. And a lot of people are not used to ever having a union. We've had the labor movement pretty effectively, neutered over the last few decades, and
Right.
they've done a great job of propagandizing against it, and so a lot of drivers don't see the need for it, or they're afraid of it, or they fear the change, or they fear like the amount of work that would be required to actually have an organized labor movement. I still think that it's a better idea than not having one, because I don't think the status quo is really sustainable. And none of us are really happy right now, and the only way that's going to change is if we change it.
And we don't have any leverage.
We do not.
We
So,
just accept what coming our way.
right. So,
If there is a one message you would like to pass along to your riders, Uber and Lyft, other professional drivers, what would it be?
this job is sometimes looked down upon as being low skilled or no skilled or whatever. It's not. And it's also necessary. A lot of people depend on this. You are somebody's safe ride home. You're sometimes an escape from a bad situation. You are sometimes saving a life, from somebody who's might otherwise get killed drunk driving. Other times you're just helping somebody get to their job, and it might be an important job, and it might be somebody working at the local Dunkin', and you know there is value to this, and I believe that. And it does take skills to do this well. There are a lot of drivers doing this, and almost anybody can do this job, but not many people could do it well. So
Sure.
I say, that's why I say I think rideshare is actually, there is value in it. And, the drivers and the passengers should always keep that in mind. It is a field where, recent immigrants who are just trying to start making, earning a living, very often fall into, because it is something where you don't really have to, it doesn't take a lot to get hired for it. But, that said, it does take skills to interact with people well, to drive safely. So, yeah, fortunately, I've never felt in danger while doing this job. Even when I'm rolling around at like 4 o'clock in the morning, it's usually just somebody who's like closed at a restaurant. And they're just trying to get home.
Right. They just
So,
need it right.
yeah. And also, if I can offer one piece of advice, don't talk on your phone to your friend or something while the passenger's in the car. Nobody wants to hear that.
Definitely.
Don't, please don't do that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Neil, I'm glad we finally met.
Mm-hmm.
I know our conversation was back and forth for quite some time, and I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank
Thank
you for
you.
your suggestion.
This is a lot of fun.
It's a very good food place. Happy we did it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Appreciate you. Still good.
Let's eat and then film this.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
I started with Lyft, and right now I would argue that Lyft is paying a bit better than Uber. Lyft are still offering bonuses, and I'm seeing surges happening way more often on Lyft than I ever see on Uber. And Uber has been offering ridiculously low fares for very long distance rides. Now, to be fair, both Lyft and Uber have completely cut into what you would get from long rides when they switched over to upfront pricing.
Dynamic pricing.
Yeah, because once we switched away from doing a rate card of miles and minutes, you used to be able to make quite a bit of money on a long distance ride, but the way that Lyft and Uber get their profit now is they take like 50, sometimes 60% of a long ride. So, we used to get a lot more of that, of that ride. But then again, when this all started originally, it was a roughly 70-30 split, with the driver getting about 70% of the ride. That's long, long gone.
Which one do you think is more beneficial to drivers? Is it percentage split or it's a rate card?
I think percentage split is actually the best way. It's the most transparent way, because you are aware of what the passenger is paying, and you see exactly how much the company is paying of that. And it used to be that 70-30 split, that 30% would cover Lyft's cost, but also insurance and everything else. They changed their definition of what their cut is. So now they'll say, oh, we don't take any more than like 28% of it. But then they add in all the stuff that used to be part of that 30%.
Do you think there is more transparency with the split, regardless of those additional fees that we pay?
There's give and take, and there's good sides and bad sides to both versions. The commission split is more transparent. The rate card, I think, is easier for the state to regulate, because then the state could set minimums for that rate card.
Right.
So what do you want? The problem is, if you do the commission split, then the drivers are still at the mercy of the rideshare company in terms of what they're charging the passengers for fares, in terms of like what the driver gets, what percentage the driver gets. But at the same time, they have to be able to cover their expenses and profit and everything. So you would assume that they're not going to drop it too low. On the other hand, a rate card, like I said, in theory, the state could regulate that and set minimums.
Are you familiar with the Seattle rate card?
No.
They had a very similar path just a couple of years ago, and eventually they ended up going with a rate card. I'm not sure if it was a benefit to Uber and Lyft, and they steered them that way, but they went with a rate card, and it looks like their rates are up there where you can make money,
Mm-hmm.
and also they have much less drivers in Seattle, but they're still complaining about supply demand. Do you think outside of state boundaries and limiting certain criteria on vehicle year and other options vehicle come with, do you think there is anything else that could be done?
I mean, ultimately, the big problem right now is we have too many drivers for the market. And this is also being driven by Lyft and Uber. They want to have as many drivers as possible. They don't want full-time drivers. They absolutely don't. They don't want 10,000 drivers working 40 hours a week. They want 100,000 drivers working 4 hours a week. Because, once you get like full-timers, then you start getting into the questions of, are they employees? Are they, do they get benefits and everything? They just want people who are just doing this, for part-time. So that is why they are encouraging as many drivers as possible to flood the market. And you've seen on busy nights, you can open up a Lyft app to see nearby drivers and see absolutely just choked, the streets just choked with unengaged drivers.
Right.
So something's got to be done. But on the other hand, who decides who gets to drive? By what criteria? Is it does Boston only get to have people who live in the limits of Boston or the immediate suburbs? Because then you'd be locking out a bunch of people who might not ever be able to serve. They might not want to drive around in Worcester or Springfield or any place, or down in Fall River. Those places will suddenly have too few drivers. So, there's that question of how do you limit things without suddenly getting into situations where the app won't let you log on, because that happens in New York.
Right.
When there's, if there isn't enough demand, they will just lock people out, because they don't want to have a whole bunch of people on there that, they may have to pay a minimum wage to. So.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to repeat the path that New York went. But do you think that limiting to Massachusetts drivers only would make a huge difference?
I think that would be a start, because there are a lot of drivers who come in from New Hampshire and Rhode Island.
Right.
And I mean, it wouldn't be good news for them, because they were kind of dependent on the Boston market for being profitable. But at the same time, we can't sustain what we have right now.
And it's only fair if you pay the expenses of Massachusetts, which is significantly higher than New Hampshire or Rhode Island.
Yes.
Then you're available to pick up jobs from here.
Oh yeah. If we limit out-of-state drivers from coming in, it's going to be only fair that Massachusetts drivers cannot operate in other states. On the other hand, then you'd be limiting. There are people who want to have rides all the way down to New York City, and then suddenly nobody's going to want to be able to take them down there if they can't get some business coming back. Because right now, if I go down to New York City, I can drive into Connecticut and drive on Lyft to get home. Or, you can drive into Rhode Island and then start getting back into Massachusetts. But again, if we lock everybody into state boundaries, that's going to end. And then suddenly nobody's going to ever want to do nobody's ever going to want to pick up a long distance, passenger again.
With the return to boundary fee, I think Massachusetts drivers will feel happy. Whenever they get the job outside of the states, it's going to pay back. So that they don't have to look for extra jobs.
So there are some who are thinking that requiring livery, would actually be an answer. Although I don't really agree, because getting a livery license is incredibly expensive, and securing insurance and everything.
I believe that livery used to be great as far as protection by the city, by the local government, because without the license you couldn't really operate livery. But I think it's a conversation that we missed over 10 years ago. I think if 10 years ago drivers would stood up and say we won't keep livery, similar to the way New York drivers did, we would be able to keep professional commercial license plates. But as far as how much benefit will it give to drivers, I think it's a huge expense as far as insurance.
Oh, yeah.
It's a huge limitation as far as going out of state, maintaining interstate authority and all that.
Yeah.
So I personally think that livery is not the way to go for drivers. I think what we have right now is pretty great, as long as we can modify it just a little bit.
Yeah.
So, because this is a conversation between drivers and TNCs.
Yeah.
We're not talking about like how it will change to riders, but if we can agree with the TNCs that the share of the profit should be distributed more fairly,
Right.
then that's the bottom line. We don't need anything else.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, we all do this because we like the option of being able to, work when we want to and not work when we want to. I have to go off and do something for like the next 3 months. I'm not going to be able to drive at all. It's nice that I don't have to ask permission or get leave or, do that. And, I certainly would like to keep that. That is that flexibility that they always keep, going on about in the ads whenever they talk about like not having, unions or anything. But at the same time, at the same time, I feel like you said, we just need to modify things slightly so that it doesn't feel like we're constantly getting pinched by the companies. This is a weird job when you think about it. I was not interviewed for it. I uploaded my paperwork. They ran a background check. They made me watch a few videos and answer some questions, and then I was thrown into the deep end. Essentially, I'm working for a cell phone. It's a very odd situation when you think about it. Labor law was never designed for anything like this.
For sure.
And a lot of the power is in the power of the TNC companies because, they control all the information, and like you said, it's entirely one-sided in terms of the relationship. We don't get people, who regularly talk to us. It used to be, like Lyft used to have like a fairly nice, driver relations system. You can go into the Lyft hub, and then they would do things for the drivers. There was a lounge. There were, they would have events like on during the Super Bowl where you could sit there and like relax before you went back out driving. It felt like they were trying to create a community, and that's long gone. Now it's pretty much it's a faceless company, and you just have, if you have a problem, you get sent to some call center, God knows where, with somebody who has no power to really help you.
Yeah.
So it's difficult.
It's unfortunate. But I do believe that we still have a power to change that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the problem is we need to get drivers to actually start working together and agree that, we have to work together to do it. We're a very fractured community. We're not really a community. But I mean, we're divided by language. We're divided by different needs, and it's difficult to wrangle all these people.
For sure, but we do have a lot of similarities as far as the needs. As far as financial needs, as far as flexibility needs.
Yeah.
And I know there is another dialogue going between the drivers, especially the ones that are doing part-time. They're concerned that their flexibility will be changed. Somehow impacted. What do you think about that?
The truth of the matter is the full-timers, we're a small percentage of the total driving population, but we also do like a huge percentage of the total drives. The problem with it is, most drivers aren't full-time. They just do this for a bit of extra cash. And I don't think that Lyft and Uber particularly like the full-timers because they don't want us to be full-timers. Uber and Lyft want to have as many drivers, active at any time because the reason that we have that flexibility of when we can go on and offline is because they know there's enough drivers out there constantly going on and offline that they can handle the churn of drivers doing that. But you need to over-provision drivers in order to make that work.
There was agreement for $32.50, and as well as 1 hour sick pay out of 30, and then the healthcare stipend, and that some settlement from AG. What do you think about all that?
I think it's a good idea in theory, and the actual reality of it has not been that great so far. I mean, it's still early days, but I think the problem is that, well, okay, twofold. By establishing a minimum wage of 32.50, the rideshare companies have now been tuning the algorithm to make that the target pay for all drivers. So I think we've all seen a significant drop in income since the settlement. Also, we now have too many drivers on the road. Too many people are coming in from out of state, lured by this promise of 32.50 an hour for driving. And Lyft and Uber have been very, very active in recruiting people to rent, which is another big problem because renting through Lyft and Uber is not a recipe for success. But you now have people who are desperately on the road for 60 or 70 hours a week trying to cover the rental costs of their vehicles and also trying to make this 32.50. And so far it's not really helped very much.
From your personal experience, what was the average that you could manage to pull once they introduced that 3250?
Before the settlement, I would normally, if I wasn't making at least $40 an hour online, I would think that I'm not doing well for the day. So that's been significantly lowered since the settlement.
What about sick pay? Do you find it as a good idea overall?
Again, it sounds great in theory. The sick pay is only $20 an hour, and you can only claim a maximum of 8 hours at a time. And so you can maybe get $160 of sick pay, but for that you have to earn 30, active, engaged hours to do that. And we all know that engaged hours and online, are not nearly the same. So we were talking earlier that, the $30 and to earn that hour of sick pay is closer to like 50 hours of online time,
If not more.
if not more.